And now we are recording. All right. I am here with George ALEXOPOULOS, aka G Prime 85 over on Twitter. Normally, folks, this would be a live streamed discussion. I prefer doing live streams whenever humanly possible, but I'm having some connection issues with Starlink. I need you all to go harass Elon Musk and tell him to give me more bandwidth, please. And tell him to do that. Anyways, George, how are you doing this morning?
I'm awesome. It's been a relaxing Saturday, the first in quite a while. Uh, so it's fun to just relax and chat and talk about art and things that I actually know things about, unlike questions I get where it's like, what do you think of this political thing? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, I would definitely feel the same way. Hold on one second. I'm just trying to get that slideshow to cooperate. So you've been working on this book, Ghost of the Badlands, with Razor Fist, which seemed like a sudden departure from the kind of stuff that people normally associate you with. Like people usually know you through your political satire comics and stuff like that, or more like cartoony stuff. How did this come about? Like, how did you end up getting into, dark Western and stuff with Razor Fist?
Well, this specific project came about because I had already been in touch with him. His previous book, where he wrote like a pulp novella called Death Mask, which is part two in his series, about sort of like a rogue-like, thievish, medieval fantasy story. The first one escapes me right this second. But anyway, I did illustrations for Death Mask, the interiors. I had talked to him a little bit on Twitter. I was telling him, I'm a big fan, love your stuff. If you ever want to work together on something. And he says, well, yeah, in fact, I'm working on something now. So he commissioned some art from me to do the illustrations. And then months went by, I think, and he did a video about, it was called Why Westerns Matter. And he got me really pumped to work on a Western. And I was doodling and practicing and thinking of what kind of Western would I make if I could. And then I was chatting with him again, just whatever, back and forth, whatever. And I said, or he said, somebody said, he's working on a Western, he's writing one. And I said, oh, I'll draw it if you want, something like that. I don't remember the exact wording. And so it just snowballed. And he sent me a script, and I liked the script, and I sent him pictures. He liked the pictures, and because I've had experience with Indiegogo campaigns and stuff, I basically said, hey, why don't we just crowdfund it instead of going through the publisher route? And he said, that sounds good. So I'm doing the campaign and the illustrations. He's writing it, and where it's like a team kind of thing, but it's his story.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm proud to illustrate it. It's a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to research it. And it is different from my political strips, I suppose. But before I even did political strips, I was trying to be an American manga artist. And so this is where my passion is. I get to use all my skills as opposed to political strips. I feel like that's more like sort of like a little circus show where I'm just juggling. I like juggling, but I also want to do other things too.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I was, one of the things I found really interesting about this is, one second, there we go. Just trying to get that slideshow moving. So cowboy Western stuff in American comics doesn't seem to sell well, or at least, or at the very least, there's not a lot of people doing it. Yeah, definitely not lately. But if you look at France or European comics more broadly and manga, there's a lot more interest and appreciation for Westerns as a genre. Like obviously, what's it? Blueberry, by oh gosh, Mobius. That wasn't created by Mobius. Okay, I couldn't remember if it was created by him or if he was just mainly the artist on it. We don't really have any, at least I can't think of anything in North American comics, recent ones, that is anything like that. Was were foreign takes on cowboy westerns kind of an inspiration for you in Razor Fist with this?
Um, inspiration wise, like he has always loved uh, BD and I guess the foreign interpretations of the Wild West.
Mm-hmm.
So again, he's done numerous videos about the interpretations of the West, and uh, that got me really pumped. But at myself, I've never had access to like French comics. Like I don't even know where to find a Mobius book around here. Um, but I think it's really interesting that the romance of the Wild West captured the imagination of Europeans for so many decades, even back to like the Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and even before that, the spaghetti westerns and stuff. I think part of that is because their countries are relatively orderly and they have thousands of years of history, whereas the Wild West was like this dream of a country with no laws basically, and you just run around this wilderness and the only authority is you and a horse and a gun maybe. And I can imagine why so many, like say my grandpa's generation, he loved John Wayne and stuff. He came from just a random village in Greece, and he didn't have much going on. But like, I'm sure to him, the allure of the American wilderness was so cool, and yeah, I imagine it's very exciting for people who live in relatively small countries. I'm not pooping on Europe or anything, but like
Right.
America's to them like huge. So
I know the whole U.S. is like it's almost as big as Texas.
I've heard that, and even bigger than Alaska. I've heard.
Wow.
um, yeah, but for us here, I suppose it's not as magical because we live here. I would guess. But to our generation, we didn't grow up with all the westerns, and but anyway, according to Razor, it's on its way back, and I've always admired the genre. Um, it's really fun for me to draw these things because I've never drawn half of these subjects before. Like I didn't really know how to draw horses. I still don't. But it's a great opportunity because I was doing research, and there are a million equestrian centers around where I live, and I'm so lucky. And I actually have family members who know people who ride horses, so I'm going to be doing research visiting them, and maybe I'll even learn to ride myself. So there's all kinds of great, like I'm learning how to draw these things, and I'm going to experience them with my own with all my senses if I possibly can. I want to go to Arizona where the story is set and feel the textures of like the trees. I didn't even know Arizona had a lot of green mountains, and they have
Oh
snow.
yeah.
They have snow there. I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I'm having a great time doing all this research. I hope I don't indulge too much. If people will allow me to spend some of the money going over there and taking pictures of wagons and guns and clothes, and I'll indulge in that a little bit.
You definitely should. I mean, I'm a bit biased. I'm from the Southwest myself. I don't own a single fabric tie. I am strictly a bolo tie kind of guy.
See, I don't even know the difference.
Oh, so bolo ties are like it's like the kind of like the little like sort of silvery kind of conch shape thing, and then there's a pair of there's like a leather string that that goes
like a
down
Texas thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's common throughout a lot of the Southwest, but people tend to associate it with New Mexico and Texas, but you'll find it in the rural parts of Southern California, definitely Arizona and Nevada as well. So get yourself one. I actually have a Greek friend who managed to find like a traditional like Greek meandros pattern on a bolo
Cool.
tie. So I can probably hook you up there.
I would accept that. I actually think I own one somewhere.
Oh, nice.
Texas friends gave it to me, and I think I have it in one of my drawers. But
Sweet.
yeah, like there's all kinds of clothing rules that all right, Razor gave me a huge checklist of these are the do's and don'ts of Westerns. Like never draw someone wearing suspenders and a belt at the same time. Stuff like
Exactly.
that.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me as a Yankee, I don't know these things. But it's super fun. Like people will tease me about being so ignorant, but I think also it's fun for them to like I really am trying to honor the West, and all the things that they think are cool. So if they tease me lightheartedly, that's fine. Just like take it easy on me. I've only shot guns twice. Uh, I don't know how to ride a horse yet, but I will learn these things.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty awesome that you might actually like be doing the hands-on, like lived reference
Yeah.
for the stuff that you're drawing. Like I don't think anything in the world compares to that. Like I notice the difference between, if I am just kind of guessing at drawing mechanical stuff versus like actually like going to a scrapyard and handling the things and feeling the weight and all that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, memory wise, I don't know if your mind works the same way. Like when
mhm.
I try to pull from my memory, I try not to use reference too much because I don't want to rely on it. I remember things when I touch them, you know? If I
Yeah.
feel the bark of a tree or sand. Uh, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was listening. Yeah, like I'm the exact same way for the most part. There's some stuff I just have to kind of make my best fantasy construction as I can, but yeah, I actually don't use a lot of visual reference while I'm drawing either, unless I'm drawing something I'm noticing that I'm erasing and redrawing and I'm getting truly stumped.
Mhm.
Then I'll, go to Pinterest and look up a reference and see what bone I'm drawing wrong and all that stuff. But yeah, I agree about experiencing the stuff that you want to draw and then, fantasizing it or whatever. It lends a way more tactile believability to it than just looking at photo reference and whatnot. And you can tell when somebody is a little bit limited to photo references. Things tend to have kind of a very lovingly rendered quality, but they become a little bit stiff, I've noticed. And you're looking at some of your sample pages here, like it's extremely dynamic stuff. Like I was looking at some of the expressions and body language, the way you're doing clothing billowing in the wind. Like it has this very it feels like it captures like the tornado-y aspect of the West, even though there's not really tornadoes in Arizona, but it conjures up that feeling of Dust Bowl sandstorms
Mhm.
or the windswept American steppe. Like how did you go about, like, I don't know, imagining that in your head and then creating it visually?
Well, that's a really nice compliment. I'm kind of embarrassed because I'm just kind of I don't want to pull my reference from third parties like movies or photographs. So I will try during my research that I did before we launched. I was looking at old magazines, no newspapers, really from the 1800s. I actually my old job I was handling these newspapers from back in those days, so I was just lucky, and I want to try to pull from resources that are either firsthand that I experienced myself, or as close to the originals as possible. So when I'm even looking at old drawings from Civil War newspapers, and I'm noticing the kinds of things like they would use. I don't remember. It was like wood block prints or something, lithographs. I don't remember the exact techniques they used to use, but the way that they would reproduce art is a lot like how what we would see in like Gustave Dore's illustrations for like Paradise Lost and stuff, like really etchings and very fine lines to produce gray values, which no comics artist who's sane is going to do that for 100 pages.
Yeah.
But there are little tricks like drawing sand. I'll use a specially designed brush that will allow me to stipple really fast. And then I'll go in there and make sure it doesn't look too uniform, for example. I want to use elements like everyone knows what it feels like, allegedly, uh, what it feels like to have sand blasting in your face and wind and stuff. And the more motion we put, and I'm speaking preaching to the converted because your panels are super dynamic. But like I want to use the z-axis as much as possible to pull people into the page. Um, Anything that you can do visually to suggest the other senses, like touch is a huge one for me. So I want to have textures that you feel like you can touch on the page. Sand flying or even speed lines, which manga artists use all the time. Um, Yeah, I don't know. I just try to use as many tools without cheating as possible. Like I wouldn't want to use digital techniques that are shortcuts, but I'm
Hmm.
like, say I'm using brushes that I would use anyway if I had ink in my hand, but I'm also letting myself use white ink, which in real life white ink is really hard for me to use. um, but I've seen etching artists use it all the time, so I'm giving myself permission to take that shortcut because it's something I would do anyway. It just would have taken me hours in real if I did it physically.
That's a lot of stuff you're describing is exactly what I do with my inks. Like I try to think of it in terms of, it's not that I'm trying to avoid a digital look. It's going to look digital no matter what. Um, but I try to do things that would make sense theoretically as a physical medium. Like when I'm inking, I think of it as kind of like I'm also painting with white. Like I'm thinking of the white space as a part of the page as much as whatever is inked and detailed. And I do a lot of the same rules. Like anytime if I do use a brush that has like some kind of stippling or kind of splattery paint effect, even if it's a really 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 high quality digital brush, and there's like some really incredible ones out there, there's always going to be something about it that just is a little bit too uniform. And I find myself doing exactly what you described, where you have to go in and add your own just human decision making to the pattern to make sure that it's not too canned looking.
That's a fair way to put it. I'm intrigued by uh, your position on using white because I've always been bothered by this. When I start coloring, I'll use like a 15 or 20% gray as my base. And then I tell myself I will only use white as an exclamation mark. Like white should not be the default because once you use white, there's nowhere else you can go after once you're in that corner. But if you use a gray, even a warm or cool gray, you have directions you can go if you want to highlight something. Is that how you approach your colors?
Somewhat, yeah. The way I'm inking Wyatt is I'm pretty much doing it just binary, white and black in the inks. But when it comes to colors, yeah, if you ever see anything that comes close to white, it's probably going to be either it's going to be like literally just a completely plain white empty space for a very profound moment, or it is going to be what you said, like it's going to be like a focal point level of like a visual exclamation point, like the glint on a character's eye or a knife blade or something like that.
Or
But
in our case, it's word balloons and frame
yeah,
borders. So we're already using white.
yeah, exactly. Just one second. This freaking slideshow is giving me sass. Oh well, I'll just do it this way. Um, or I was like, oh, there was one question I had for anybody listening who doesn't know what the z-axis is. Could you explain what that means?
Oh, okay. I'm not an expert on geometry, but X is horizontal, Y is vertical, and Z would be in and out on a sheet of paper. So if I'm putting my hand like this, getting closer to you, or if
Mm,
I'm holding a gun like this, right? Like that
okay.
famous in the Matrix when Trinity holds the gun at the camera and says, "Dodge this."
Mm-hmm.
It's dynamic. It says, I'm going into the page. There's lines pulling me into the center. So, like, I guess sort of the example that you were showing, or that's even better.
This one
Um,
right here.
the next one where he's shooting the guys,
Yeah.
we're looking down over his shoulder at the guy he's shooting the second he's shooting them. So that's a z-axis trick that gives the illusion of depth. Obviously, it's a two-dimensional page, but it's something that I think good artists have used in the past that I'm just copying. We're all learning from each other, but like using depth is a great way to excite readers. And it's like even the rain is trying to pull you and show you the speed. The horses are moving real fast even the trees in the background or have speed lines. They're rendered using speed lines, and it's all a manga trick that I have noticed over many years of enjoying manga, that motion is one of the best tools that manga artists use, and depth, and it just feels more exciting to look at these pages for some reason.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like even though we don't see like the details on, there's basically like no detail in the background, but we don't need it because like there's just so much atmosphere here. Another thing I get when I look at a lot of these pages is I can, even if you weren't using the sound effects, I think I would still be able to hear in my head what's going on because of how textured everything is. Do you find that when you're when you're drawing these scenes, do you have like a kind of like a sound effects soundtrack going off in your head about it? Because I find myself like literally I will find myself sometimes when I'm getting really into it, I know it's a good page, I will catch myself making like sound effects, kind of like being a little kid making like noises while you're drawing stick figures. Do you get any of that?
Oh yeah, and even when you're drawing characters, you'll make their facial expressions as you're
Yeah.
drawing it stuff. Yeah, for sound effects, I'm always on the fence about this. Actually, I try in my comics when I work by myself, I almost never use sound effects. I personally don't like them,
Mm-hmm.
but I've seen in many Western examples that Razor was using, and his script had the sound effects. I said, it's honoring the Western comic from many decades ago. Even Blueberry, which you mentioned, used sound effects. And for instance, there was one panel that you showed where the sound effect is paw, as the gun is
Mm-hmm.
shooting PAW. And
Yeah,
I
that was a
can
very not a normal like
yeah.
American comic sound effect.
Yeah, and I thought it was weird when I was reading the script, and then Razor showed me examples where that was used. And I don't know if it was Mobius's comics, but I guess a French comic for that model gun, that's the sound effect he thinks it makes. And in Japan, they use sound effects all the time. It's a whole art. I don't remember the word for it, but turning your sound effects into elements on the page, like you can even make the words be 3D and
Mm-hmm.
become a visual element that will enhance the action. So even though I don't tend to use them in my own comics, I've I've seen that they can be used to enhance the page, and it's one of those things where I'm going to embrace it, um, because it is Razor's comic, and I want to honor his script, and he put it there, so I'm going to try my best to make it look the way that I've seen it work well in other comics. But yeah, I wouldn't have used them, but I try to draw as if I don't need the sound effects personally. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. For the longest time, I resisted using sound effects until it got to the point where, like working on Wyatt, there were some scenes where something is happening, off panel, and while yeah, I could convey that there's a sudden noise happening, by drawing the character's expression and their spinning around looking reaction, but it gets to a point where you're having to create extra panels and stuff to convey that. And before you know it, your page count is blowing up out of control.
Yeah.
So I had to embrace sound effects as well. And in the process, I did start to appreciate them as part of the art, when previously I thought of them as a crutch. I wanted to not have to use them. I still try to limit my use of them. Like if it's, just a character like going up some steps, I'm not going to do step, 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 something like that. But if it's like boom, or, a big, like something big that really, really you want the reader to kind of be slapped with, then
Yeah.
I'll use it.
I think for us, because we're visual types of people, we don't want to lean on the crutch of sound effects. If we can do the sound effect visually in the art, then that's like it would impress people like us. But I
Mm-hmm.
think to the common reader, they don't care. So if it saves us a few days of extra work, we may as well.
Yeah, I think the readers don't care about whether or not you use sound effects unless they don't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So if it's a scene where there needs to be a sound effect and there's not, and they're confused with what just happened, then that's a sign that it was a bad decision on the artist or letterer's part. Or if there's unnecessary sound effects just kind of covering the artwork, um, like when people do unnecessary motion lines, when it's just a character who's just there or something. I it kills the image and confuses the reader. And what I'm seeing here is like a really nice contrast between blistering motion lines, again, like that very manga Otomo type of thing, or Kentaro Miura sort of vibe. And then here, I want to go back to this one, like this panel right here in the lower left. I love how you've got this swirling sand down here, down below his knees. But then everything up here is eerily still, complete with like the moon providing this circular frame for him. Do you have like do you go into a panel like that planning that out from the get-go, or do you feel it out as you're drawing that?
Well, in that case of that panel, it's all in the script. So,
Oh, really?
the way that Razor described it was the two guys, and we'll actually publish the script with the deluxe edition, so people can look at the thumbnails and then look at the script and see how I interpreted his text. I think he wrote something like the two guys are kind of confused and like wandering by themselves, and then the ghost there just appears almost out of like nowhere, like out of the mist, out of the sand. And the idea is that he's loading his gun and they don't even know he's there. And I'm thinking, like, how could a guy approach two guys looking in all directions? And the script implies that he just appears. So the way that I would have drawn that, the way I interpreted it, I guess, is he's always been there. They just couldn't see him. And so the sand underneath him is kind of conjuring his body out of thin air. So I like the idea of the sand is moving under him and he just kind of morphed into frame. He's always been there. They're doomed. And then the speed lines in panel, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're focusing on him past their bodies to suggest he's coming to get you. There's nothing you can do. But these are tricks that we've seen, like you mentioned, Miura and Katsuhiro Otomo. Yeah, these are, tricks that they've been doing in manga since the 60s. So these are, I'm just borrowing tools invented by titans. We're just kind of seeing what works. And I still think in America, we're still learning the language of manga and even European comics, but specifically manga for me. I don't think a lot of American readers have seen these techniques. So it's really cool to use this project as an opportunity to show people there's a different dialect of comics that, like even my page count, Razor's page count initially for the story was 50 drawn pages. But as I was interpreting his script into thumbnail form, the final manuscript ended up being 102 pages, something like that.
Wow.
So, but that's just my natural way. I was reading what he wrote and I was drawing it. And I said, this is how a manga artist would make these actions take place. And I wanted to let his script breathe. I wanted to really milk the action. And the way that a manga artist would draw it, I think, would be something like this. But I'm a little rusty, I'll admit. I probably could have done more establishing shots. But I think there's a cool dialect, like I was saying, that American readers aren't used to with a story like this. So it'll be really fun to see, like, is it really fresh to them? Is it weird? Did I do it right? It's kind of a cool experiment.
Yeah, this also brings up this is a little bit adjacent to the the battle you've been having on Twitter against the people who dismiss the arts and stuff. In the US, a lot of people, when they think of comics, they immediately think it's either kid stuff, they think of spandex and capes and stuff like that. Or maybe they'll know about manga, sort of like they'll say like, oh, it's those Japanese cartoons or something, but they've never actually like picked it up or treated it as a serious storytelling medium.
Mm-hmm.
Do you foresee like any kind of change coming in the, I don't know, either whether it's happening now or in the near future in terms of, I don't know, more people in the US appreciating comics as a legitimate, like all ages storytelling medium that it doesn't have to be like, it seems like the only mainstream understanding of comics is either it's like the big two, Marvel, DC, Cape stuff, or it's like, Scholastic, the stuff that's, aimed at like young, was it like, I think they call it middle grade. I can't remember like the age group categorizations, but basically like
young adult.
School book fair type stuff. Like I like some of that stuff, like Amulet, which I would argue is a perfect example of a truly all ages adventure story.
Bone.
Yeah, Bone. That's a great example. But it's weird. Like when people in the US talk about that stuff, it's usually in the context of like, oh, I loved that as a kid. So I like it now, but you don't really hear that many people between the ages of kid and up getting into it. Do you think any of that can change?
It will change. I'm sure of it. Unfortunately, I think we live in a generation. I'm in my late 30s now. I think
boomers.
People younger than us grew up with more and more video games and manga and anime and stuff. So I think we're unfortunately going to be old men by the time it's more respected. The reason I get that feeling is because people who are older than us or our age but didn't grow up with it, like I have been picking on Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire, but he's just
I've been enjoying watching you bully him.
Bully. It's funny because he's got a huge platform, so it's like people are like, hey, don't punch down on him, and I'm like, it's not my fault that I know more about this than him. He just doesn't enjoy. Anyway, I'm not going to pick on him specifically, but people like him and his contemporaries who are our age and older did not grow up with this stuff, and I think they're just naturally resistant to new things or things they don't understand, so naturally they will try to dismiss it as, oh, games are addictive, therefore I won't expose my kids to it, or I won't play it myself because I just don't like games, or I think anime is silly, it's for children. But
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry,
there's just a moment lag there. You go ahead and continue.
Yeah. I grew up with anime and games and stuff, and being an older man myself now, I still play these things. I still read those books. I still watch animation, not as much as I used to, just because I don't have time. But I grew up respecting it and admiring people who made it. And I told myself from a young age, I love this stuff. I love art. I want to make this stuff when I get older. So I get really pissed off, maybe more pissed off than I should, when people dismiss the discipline that I'm sort of devoting my professional life to. As for when it will take over here, I think there's, like, if you go to Barnes and Noble, everybody uses this example. If you go to Barnes and Noble and look at the Western comics section, it's maybe a few shelves, like 3 or 4 shelves max. But then if you look at the manga section, it is a whole wall of manga. And I think, and that's, if you talk to young people, I have young people in my life who like anime and stuff, and they tell me what they're reading now: Demon Slayer, My Hero Academia. Back a few years ago, it was Naruto, and even Death Note and stuff, which are all cool. But there's all kinds of manga that they're reading and they're enjoying it. And when they grow up, I don't think they will say the same things that the people on the right who are dismissive of these mediums, they will not have the same position, I don't think. But unfortunately, by the time they grow up, we'll be in our 50s, and getting close to retirement.
Mhm.
So my goal in all this is to A, survive as an artist, which is hard enough,
Yeah.
and B, plant seeds for people who are up and comers to be able to make comics and games and whatever they want and not be dismissed by sticks in the mud who think it's like demonic or it's just for children. Because obviously you and I know manga, games, anime, whatever, it's just a medium, and there are genres for everybody in these mediums. Um, so it will be respected, I think, probably in a few more decades, unfortunately.
That's too bad it's going to take that long. But I mean, you know, that whole, what's it, that one quote about planting seeds for trees that we won't live long enough to sit in the shade of, but
Yeah.
future generations will. Yeah. I one criticism I often hear, again, from this type of dismissive, sort of smug, stick in the mud crowd, when they're talking about manga, they don't even talk about like French and European comics, because I don't even think they know they exist.
No.
But when they talk about manga, usually like the criticisms are like, oh, the dialogue is always so dramatic and the emotions are like just really exaggerated and stuff. It's so corny and whatnot. And I've always, whenever I saw that in manga, I'm like, yes, it's exaggerated, but it's great. Like it's a level of sincerity that I find completely lacking in mainstream Western entertainment. When I say Western, broadly North American, where, you know, dialogue is, you know, tends towards this kind of smug, witty banter type of stuff. And the emotional depth is definitely lacking. There's exceptions, but they seem to be exceptions. Whereas in manga, generally speaking, if I open up a manga, even if it's one that I'm not going to particularly like it's, I don't know, it's about, you know, kids at a magic school or something like that, or some other, you know, setting that I'm really not into, I'm still going to be able to admire the intensity behind whatever the characters are depicted going through. I kind of went on a tangent there, but what I like, the way that ties into what you're doing here is like when you do facial expressions, and people would know this from your satire comics, where, you know, you'll draw somebody doing the classic like freak out face, and you will just like go to Cronenberg levels of almost cartoonish body horror exaggeration with it. And I notice you're carrying some of that energy in these pages, albeit in a more cinematic, less, you know, hyper cartoony way. Do you have you ever like had anybody like glance at what you're doing here with Ghost of the Badlands and, I don't know, dismiss it as like it's cartoony or it's just for kids, but change their minds after taking a closer look or hearing you out?
It's possible I will hear that when the book is released and they see more art. Like, I actually would have preferred to adapt my style to look more Western. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's one panel that you had before where there was a fire and the guy's looking at a little girl over her dead parents. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Her face, for example, I think is probably a little too Japanesey, like
Mm.
manga-ish. As I look at it, I'm like, I could probably have done better. But right now in production, I can't worry about every single little panel. It's one of those things where if I get more complaints before the book is released, I might change it. But there's all kinds of little, or even one of the pages where a guy is screaming at his friends, like he's saying something and then he gets shot in the head. Um, that one and that one where the guy's
Yeah.
yelling, that's a little too Japanesey, I think, for like tone
Yeah.
wise. I George do not like that panel, but if I was to tell myself, hey, we need to redraw that so Western audiences will like the book more, I'm telling myself, like, is it like 5% of readers? Are they going to see that panel and put the book down? Or are they just going to go, huh, and keep reading? because that I tell myself will get a pass. Even though I'm not satisfied with that panel, I'll let it go. Things like, did I draw the gun wrong? That requires a redraw. There's a panel, I think 2 pages before that, where, yes, panel 3 of that page, where he's holding the gun and shooting it. I redrew that panel like 4 times because I didn't know what that gun looked like. It's a Bergman 1896 Model 3 or something. And I ended up having to make a clay model of it because I couldn't get it right. That kind of thing needs redrawing. But as for if people will read my stuff, my art, and say it looks distractingly bad, that would bother me, as opposed to it's just in a different style and that's okay. That I will allow to go to print. Unless Razor says, I don't like that panel, redraw it, then I have to. But as far as style goes, unfortunately, in our medium, comics, we have to prioritize speed over like perfect polish. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I'm always struggling with that myself, trying to get things to where, okay, does this panel communicate everything that it needs to?
Yeah.
Okay, then I have to stop here and move on to the next one. And that's always really hard. Like I'm like Dr. Strangelove, like fighting with my own drawing hand as it tries to just make that panel more of a museum piece, when you have to remind yourself constantly that it's not about the panel, it's about the story as a whole. And the panel has to serve the story. And it can't do that if you never get the story done.
No. And I mean, as tempting as it is, I mean, I don't know how long Wyatt is, but
that's 200 pages.
Okay.
I'm 166. I'm 166 pages in. So
okay.
It's,
because I mean, however many panels you average per page, say 5, 6, maybe. I'm just guessing.
Approximately, yeah.
I mean, that's times 200. That's a lot of drawings, and depending if we have production obligations, like we've told people now for Ghost of the Badlands that it's going to release in January. I'm planning to finish in August, actually. So I can't give myself permission to worry about every single panel. The story manga also is designed to be read way faster than an American page. I think the average page for manga is maybe 30 seconds of reading versus an American page, which can be in the minutes. So you're supposed to turn the pages fast. And if you're not turning the pages fast in a manga, you're probably it's probably the artist's fault. At least again, it's like kind of like martial arts where jujitsu is about fighting this way, and then another fighting style is about, no, you're supposed to fight this way. But ultimately, it's about fighting. So in manga, you have a certain style of composing a page for speed, and American comics tend to lean towards density. Like I always go to Watchmen as my example of the slowest page. I think it's 9 panels, and it drives me nuts how slow it is to read, but there's so much story packed into each page. It's just a different style of telling a story.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that the French graphic novels, I'm gonna mispronounce the word. The BDs, is it bande dessinée?
Bande dessinée, I don't know.
Bande dessinée,
French.
They definitely tend towards they tend towards a very interesting blend of density, but also they have a certain speed to them where I'll notice that they do things with negative space that American comics just seem to have completely lost touch with.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's tons of different examples out there. Like my favorite is probably Siegfried by ALEXOPOULOS, but every one of those pages is like, even though I've noticed that with a lot of the European, broadly French comics that I've read, usually I'll read through them fast, and then I'll read through them again to take in the detail. And so that kind of reread value I find very fun. Like, I one thing I have been indulging in Wyatt is uh inserting stuff that people will only notice on a second read that is, might foreshadow something later on in the story or be called back to later without spoiling anything on your end. Are you experimenting with anything like that in Ghost of the Badlands?
Mm. If he has it in the script, definitely. Like, there are scenes where something might get set up like, oh, this is the secret bad guy the whole time. And he shows up in an early scene where he's just a normal guy. Or there are some characters. Yeah, I guess I got to be careful with spoilers.
Yeah.
There are some characters who may not be who they seem. And um, yeah, there is a lot of hints that we have to delicately drop in there. Um, yes, foreshadowing is important, as well as something you mentioned earlier that I wanted to mention also is the panel sizes are different, and the dialogue balloon sizes are different in Japan versus even French.
Hmm.
And in Japan, they don't shy away from making huge dialogue balloons because they increase font size to emphasize volume. Like if I'm yelling, I'll use a bigger font. Whereas I rarely see that even in French and American comics. And that's just again a different way of composing a page. And one of the references that I was pulling on is a manga called Vagabond, if you've ever seen it.
I've heard
Um,
of it, but I haven't read it.
I highly recommend it
Okay.
if you're interested in black and white. Like that's probably one of the best mangas ever drawn. Just talent wise, he's one of the best manga artists ever. Um, Berserk, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'm trying to compose the pages in such a way that I don't want to go too far off topic.
Oh
Um,
no, no, you're good.
I'm just trying to remember what the original question was.
Um, that is a good question. Oh,
Going
maybe
back,
looking at the let me looking at the page will enlighten me.
my
We
bad.
were talking about like the difference using dialogue balloons bubbles uh
Oh,
a
foreshadowing.
certain way. Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about like foreshadowing, like little hidden hints and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea of rewarding multiple reads. I'm not sure if there's going to be opportunities in this specific book. Um, I don't know. It
Now,
depends on the script, really.
is this planned to be the first in a series, or is it going to be a total standalone, or is that a spoiler question?
It's not a spoiler question.
Okay.
Razor has answered in the past, so I don't feel bad. He does plan to do more books in this series. I don't know if I'm going to be the one drawing them because I'm not going to assume that, maybe he's just not happy with the way I draw this, or for some reason he wants to work with someone else. He's totally free to do that, and I'll be excited to keep reading. It will be. He has said that he wants to continue the series. Yes,
Nice.
and I would be happy to continue. But first, I have to focus on finishing this on time and
Hmm.
shipping the books, and then we'll see if I'm in a straitjacket by that point. We'll have someone else do it. But yeah,
How? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, just yeah, the story can and probably will continue after this.
Nice. So how is it working from a detailed script from somebody else? Because if I remember right, you usually work solo for the
Yes.
most part. When you're working with Razor, like how do you ever? I don't know. Do you ever find yourself having to kind of fill in gaps that maybe the writing doesn't explain? And how do you guys synergize there? Because I always had tremendous trouble
Mhm.
working with writers and stuff to the point where I just had to go like, I'm gonna sink or swim doing my own thing. It's like even if it's a writer I really really like,
Mhm.
I just know that I would not be able to think the way they're imagining things. Like how are you guys linking up with
That's a
this?
really good question. I agree with you in that most of the time I prefer to work alone. Um, because I'm just kind of a diva, to be honest, and I don't like when someone has a different vision than I do. Like if I wanted to draw something a certain way, then I'm going to draw it my way and screw everybody else, you know. But in this case, I consider it a really good exercise, and it is an honor to work with someone whose content I've been watching for years, and I like his stuff a lot. And it's really cool to see the way that he puts together a story. I haven't seen any gaps in his story. In fact, I think I went over the deep end milking his script, uh, whereas his script was very dense, and I wanted to just expand. And if he had an establishing shot that maybe was half a page or a few panels, I might turn that into 2 pages, just because I think that one paragraph he wrote deserves to have more panels assigned to it. Um, I think the biggest challenge when it comes to working with someone, in our case, working with a writer, is, I guess you could call it synergy. Do you guys understand each other's language? Do you, when you dance, do you step on each other's toes, kind of thing? The best way around that is a mutual respect, I suppose. So in his script that he gave me, I'm not, I didn't change a thing. It's his script, it's his story. I'm just honored to draw it, is my position. Um, when it comes time for me to draw my own stories, then I can go crazy and draw whatever I want to draw. So, on one hand, what it really is I'm giving myself permission to just let him lead the dance with the script, and that's an important. It's for me. It's the character growth. It's something that's not natural to me. But I do respect him and I respect his story. So I'm letting myself honor what he wants to tell, the story he wants to tell. And it so happens that I like the story. So that helps. If I was writing a story that I didn't like, or scenes that I didn't like, that would be a lot harder to do. But luckily, his taste and mine are very much in alignment. So it has not been a slog. I'm having to draw things that I've never drawn before. But I am seeing that as a challenge, not as a, oh man, I have to draw horses. Oh, I don't want to. But it's like, no, this is a Western. You have to learn to draw horses.
Yeah, I'm noticing you doing stuff like, for example, these panels here with this guy reloading and aiming right there. Like, I have a lot of experience with firearms, and I look at that and I just immediately that feels so incredibly familiar. Like I know that exact position,
Oh, good.
that feeling of like being in between actions, and stuff like that, or even like this lower middle one right here, where the ghost he's yanking the reins on one arm and he's got his pistol up on the other.
Mm-hmm.
Conceivably somebody could just come up with that without having a lot of reference, just thinking like, well, this just makes for a compelling visual. Did you get most of this by looking at references, or did you intuit a lot of it?
Probably a mixture of both.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, again, I'm embarrassed to accept that compliment because it was an accident, probably. All the things you said. But like I'm trying to think, like, there's comics nerds, and then there's also gun nerds and Western nerds that will notice every little mistake I do, and they will know if I have never ridden a horse before. Like, that's not how you turn a horse. And I'd be like, you're right. I've never done it, and I'm so sorry for screwing that up. Or I've never shot a rifle from that position before. I've only shot a rifle once in my life, but I will practice more. So for this specific, I think 11 pages for the prologue, I didn't do any physical research firsthand, but we needed to get the Indiegogo up to see if the project would get funded. So I just tried my best to sort of assume, to turn a horse, you have to pull the reins a certain way.
Mm.
To There's a million examples, I'm sure, where it's like you have to stand a certain way to hold a rifle, and I'm guessing. But now that the project is funded, I want to get out there and have firsthand knowledge of how do you even get on a horse. I don't know. I've never done it. But I want to be able to satisfy even the most scrutinous readers who know, like, what does a saddle look like? Um, I'm looking at that saddle. I don't actually know what a saddle. I don't know the names of all the things. Like, what's that thing on the? I'm gonna sound so stupid. What's that thing on the horse's head? I don't even know what it's called. That is attached to the reins.
Yeah.
I don't know the names of these things. I only recently learned. Like, I took a pistol course, and I'm like, okay, barrel, slide, hammer, grip, and I'm like, I'm learning all these terms that I never knew before. Um, just so that I hope people can read this and say, okay, at least he tried to please us.
Yeah.
You know, you can
Yeah.
tease me. It's fair, you know.
Yeah, the gun nerds.
Yeah.
I know they're watching, and want you all to know I love you guys to death, but they are also the reason why, part of the reason why I don't draw real world firearms in any of my comics. I mean, aside from the fact that, you know, it takes place in a totally fictional fantasy world, I also just did not want to deal with the, well, that thing doesn't look like it makes sense because this and that technical spec. And it's like, you know, I'm very much, I take kind of a Warhammer 40K approach to firearms. It's like, look, I had to handle them enough in my old job and stuff that I just kind of want to draw big, ugly, blocky things that shoot stuff.
It's visually interesting. And
well,
it's harder for me. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to ask about the pistol that the Ghost has, because it's a very interesting choice. It seems like I wasn't familiar with the model when I saw it. I know you named it earlier, but it has like almost a, like, you could conceivably see it being used in World War I or something like that, or make an appearance in that. What was the? Is there any significance you can tell us about behind Razor's choice to make that the main character's signature firearm?
Well, he can answer this better than me, but
Okay.
The way that he's told me, he's explained it. He owns it. He thinks it's cool, I think.
Those are the best reasons.
Yeah, I think it was Bergman 1896 Model 3, I think. And part of the reason he chose it was because everyone at that time, I guess, in this setting was using revolvers still. And this was one of the first semi-automatic loading, something like that, self-loading. I don't remember. I don't even know what the clip looks like exactly, or the magazine, excuse me.
Oh yeah, they're going to get you for that one.
I corrected myself. Magazine. I'm sorry. So the way that it even loads, it's so archaic to us, but like I need to actually ask him if I can handle his and see exactly how it opens, how it's dismantled, how all the parts interact. He chose that gun because I think it's sort of otherworldly and it's not commonly seen in Westerns. And I think he wanted to give this particular character, the Ghost, a very mysterious weapon that was not military issued, he clarifies. Actually, he talks about the gun and writes about it in the updates section of our Indiegogo if anyone wants to look.
Oh, excellent. And I've got that linked in the video info for anybody who's listening and wants to grab the book, which you should.
Well, yeah, there's a million little details about how the hammer works, and in order to pull the slide, there's like this really cool grippy looking thing. I don't know what it's called. Anyway, it's not like anything I've ever studied before. So to go there and to handle it would be a huge benefit for me. So then I can not only take reference photos, but I will know through tactile memory what it feels like in my hand to hold it. And it's especially hard for me living in New Jersey, actually. This is probably one of the biggest problems for me is I can't easily get gun reference because I live in a state where I can't even buy a model gun and have it shipped to me without jumping through hoops. Like, it's such a pain in the ass. And for me to go to a range nearby, they won't even let me practice and rent a gun unless I own one. And bring it with me. Like I have to bring someone with me to go practice and rent a gun at my local ranges. So I ended up having to buy a 1911 like practice rubber gun. And then I mentioned before, I made a Bergman out of clay that's semi realistic, I guess. But I'm trying my best, but like I live in a state that's like you can't even handle these things. Like if I'm doing reference for a Western, I have to travel across the country to
Wow.
practice. And I will. Unfortunately, I have to blow some of my budget to go across the country to practice with these weapons just to know what they feel like and sound like. Like this is silly, I guess, to the gun guys, but like I never even knew when you shoot how it feels, the shockwave that goes through you, the percussion. Like, wow, that's like a huge like standing next to a speaker and the bass goes off. I didn't know what that felt like. And then I was thinking like this is so stupid. I'm sorry if I'm wasting your time. If
No,
I
no, no. This is great stuff. Actually, like a lot of people ask me questions that you're kind of answering right now. So please
okay.
continue.
Well, you're obviously way more knowledgeable about these subjects. But like if I was watching westerns as a kid and the guy is like, he goes ba 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 ba, and shoots the guys, or someone's riding a horse one-handed, and that scene in True Grit where like fill your hands, you son of a bitch, and like he's got the reins in his mouth and he's got two rifles and he's like shooting and doing the flippy do from Terminator. And I'm like thinking, after I have shot maybe 10, 20 yards max a pistol, I'm like, there is no way anyone can accurately shoot anything one handed while riding a horse. And I'm thinking to myself, that is so uncool that I grew up thinking that that's not a superhuman feat because it's so common in Westerns. So that I'm like, I don't even know if this detail will come across in this book, but like it's so hard to hit even a stationary target while you're stationary. To hit guys running while you're on a horse one-handed is impossible. So I want to try to emphasize these kinds of details because I never grew up knowing how hard it was. Like even me two-handed with a normal pistol, I'm still not that accurate.
Mhm.
So I don't know. These are details that you would never know unless you've physically touched these tools. So I'm glad to have done it, and I'm sure there's a million other details I won't know until I physically do it myself.
Nice. It's interesting how in manga, when they depict firearms and stuff, it usually has a lot of believability to it. But I do wonder if that's just due to just extremely rigorous visual reference, because obviously, to own guns in Japan, it's
Yeah.
similarly, I think it's extreme. It's like even harder than New York,
Yeah.
from what I imagine. But there is a apparently there's a really big like Western reenactment, kind of like I don't think they shoot live ammunition, but they're using dummy rounds or whatever.
Mhm.
And there's like a whole scene for Western cosplay over there where
Yeah.
they do a lot of these gun tricks and stuff that we recognize from old Western films, but it's like I would look at some of that for reference if I had to do some stunt shooting drawing.
Mhm. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't know if they came here and practiced or they just used a lot of photo reference. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's not obscure, an artist named Ryoichi Ikegami who worked with a writer named Bronson who did Fist of the North Star and other very adult manga. And a lot of his shots are lots of guns and shooting and stuff. And I'm thinking like he must have handled these tools, or how do you get so much photo reference for so many different guns unless you actually take the photos yourself? Or do they use magazine photos? That's also possible. But one of my rules is to never use reference unless it's firsthand. Um, it's just out of an honor thing, I suppose. So if I'm going to use photo reference, I need to go to these physical locations myself. I've gathered lots of reference from YouTube videos, but I don't want to use it. Just it's not. I feel like I'm lying. I don't want to use other people's reference.
Yeah. And
If
I mean,
possible.
that's a pretty admirable level of like Renaissance man kind of trying to live what you're drawing. Uh, Sort of related to that, I had one question from. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing his name right, because he was looking forward to the live stream, but when I had to switch last minute to recorded, he relayed this question to me. He asked me, it's Raji Lee Dessinature. So he's French and he does BDs. He asks, do you carry a sketchbook? Like, do you draw daily in that and do studies, or do you only draw when you're at your workstation?
I do carry a sketchbook, but I don't use it as much as I should. And I'm so ashamed to tell other artists this. Um, I guess because I draw at my desk, it's work. So when it's time for pleasure, I tend to not draw just because I have two reasons. The big reason that I'm really embarrassed by is I don't like when people watch me drawing because then I get distracted and it's like I'm doing a performance instead of just being focused.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't get in the zone if I'm thinking about people looking at me, and that's really selfish. But like I want to take a sketchbook with me when I go to say Arizona and look at the reference instead of taking photo reference. How much better would it be to just sit and draw everything I see, if that's even possible? And I want to do that. And then as soon as someone notices me drawing, I'm going to get embarrassed and run away. Just because I don't know why. I hate this about myself. I want to be able to draw people and things and not be so self-conscious. Like I need to take life drawing classes again, and I don't know why I'm not doing it. I
Mm.
guess I'm embarrassed, but I need to. Um, so I'm shame on me because I
Yeah.
really should draw more.
Yeah, that's like it sounds like that's your snakes to your Indiana Jones that you have to
Something like that.
overcome. It's your that's going to be your journey to the underworld. You know,
Exactly.
part of your skill development story. Yeah, I never quite had that fear of, or that discomfort of people watching me draw. Usually, I don't know. I just, when I was younger, I just knew like, oh, they're just going to think it's just quaint or amusing or whatever. And they're not going to take it seriously enough to like pester me with too many questions.
Hmm.
And then as I got more experienced and older, I was able to switch it over to, okay, I know how to talk about this like it's a serious trade or a craft now. So if somebody's watching and maybe they assume that I'm just doing something frivolous or a pure leisure or something, I know how to respectfully, explain to them how this is what I do
Yeah.
for a living and stuff. But yeah, I can understand how some people, like, maybe they miss those particular social steps in life that would make it more comfortable for them to draw around other people. Like I usually carry with me two sketchbooks. Well, this is the one I carry in my bag. It's about a 5x8 sized Lloyd's sketchbook. I do my slightly nicer sketches in this one, but I like keeping a really small pocket book as well that I'll just do just gel pen sketches in. There it's lower stakes, and I find that if I'm in a situation where maybe having the slightly larger, more, gallery quality sketchbook might be a little might be a little too eye catching, might not be appropriate for the social situation. The smaller notebook thing that where you can just kind of look like you're just a guy taking notes
Yeah.
is a lot easier. So if anybody else watching this video later has a similar discomfort with, you want to draw more, but you are uncomfortable drawing in public places, I think a smaller sketchbook of decent quality paper that you enjoy the feeling of is the
Mhm.
way to go.
I'm going to have to do that. Like I'm even looking at your books. I notice they're bound on the spine, right? It's not ring bound,
Yeah, they are both. I like to use hardbound sketchbooks.
like a
I mean,
moleskin.
these are Leuchtturm actually.
Oh,
Moleskine is another good brand. I don't use Moleskine because I their paper has kind of like a yellow ivory color, which looks nice, but I just don't like how it scans with my drawings. So I prefer stuff that has just the plain white paper.
how do you spell Leuchtturm?
It's like a big long German name. It's like Leuttch. No, wait, I'm misspelling that. It's Leuchtturm. I can send
Okay,
you a link.
I will
I'll
look it up.
include I'll include actually a link in the show notes to that, since some people might find it useful to just know what I use.
Yeah, because weight is another issue. I don't actually. Here's a fun question: Do you, when you carry your sketchbook around, do you carry it in a man bag or just in your hand?
I do both. Here, I'll show you actually.
Okay.
So I do have a Manny pack. This thing right here. It looks a lot larger on screen than it really is.
Okay.
This is made by Ayer. I think they're on Amazon or whatever. Yeah, and I use it to keep like my sketchbooks, my gym workout logbook as well. Earbuds, because I can't stand the noises that people make whenever I have to go in public.
Same.
If somebody's chewing gum, I freak out. So yeah, usually I'll carry both of my sketchbooks in that bag.
Okay.
But you know, if I'm in a situation again, like if I'm at church or something, or maybe a dinner or something like that, where having the crossbody bag is maybe not the best fashion choice. You know, nobody's going to look at me weird for having like a small, you know, sort of nicely glossy hardbound notebook in my pocket that, you know, I might just kind of take out and just sort of lean over for a minute to look like I'm writing down some important thought, but really like I'm just remembering like, oh, I figured out how to draw this character's armor now. You know, that kind
Okay.
of thing.
No, that's really valuable. Like, I guess I have so many hangups. Like people sometimes comment like, "Oh, hey, did you bring your purse with you? Because I
Yeah.
carry my sketchbook in it." And like, I'll roll my eyes, but like, yeah, weight is a huge issue for me where I'm always carrying my bag with me, and I always have books in it, and my other stuff, and I'm always thinking like I have to be ready if I need to draw something, and then I start sitting down thinking like, how do I put it? If I see something that I want to draw, like I'll go to a nearby park and I'll see a cool old stone building that was from the American Revolution or something, because they're all over my area. And just I like, the rubble, the way it looks and the stones and stuff, and there's moss. And I'm thinking like, oh man, this would be really fun to draw. And then I stare at it and I say, okay, another time. And then I walk away.
Oh.
And I should draw these things. I'm ashamed and I'm going to be a better man. And uh, you've inspired me. I'm going to be a better
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, I find it helps to have like as small a bag as you can manage to carry what you need. Because I used to have like a larger kind of messenger type bag, which made sense when I was living in a city where I actually was bicycling everywhere to get around. But now that I'm in California and driving everywhere, and if I'm getting out of my car or something, it just looks weird if like you have like a backpack or a full on shoulder bag everywhere you go. Like
Maybe that's why people stare at me.
it depends. Yeah, it just depends on the context, I suppose.
I
But
don't never know how weird I look.
yeah, it's whatever you do, if it helps to just completely own it. And if somebody thinks it's a little bit weird or they raise their eyebrows about it, I try to give them the I act like I totally don't understand why they would think that's weird. Like if they ask me like, well, why do you carry that bag everywhere? And I'm like, because it has stuff I need in it.
Yeah. Well, if
It's
you show
just
them your book, it's like, because I'm an artist, and like, oh my
yeah.
goodness, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it would be like.
The only other question these weren't really questions sent to me by Radji, but he recommended a bunch of French Western comics for you, like Hoka Hey by Nayef. I'll make sure to I'll put these to you in chat form so you can check them out because they look like they'd be really good, inspiring stuff. I'm looking at some of the artwork now and it's pretty impressive. Lucky Luke. I know I've seen that one around. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not sure. It's possible that Razor sent me samples of these.
Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that I pass those recommendations to you. So for some of your inspirations, like for anybody listening who wants to get to know like some of your personal source material, like who are some of your, I don't know, your favorite comic artists, graphic novelists, or even like just artists that you get invigorated by?
I have samples behind me I could show.
Oh yeah.
But if you don't mind, I'll be right back.
Oh, no problem at
Give
all.
me 15 seconds.
Sure thing. I'm just gonna get the slideshow going here. While George is doing that, folks, I want to remind you to check out the Indiegogo campaign for Ghost of the Badlands. I've linked to it in the video notes here, video description. If you're just listening to this recording, just go to the link afterwards, and it'll have all the artwork that I put on the slideshow here.
I was looking at my shelf. No, I recently went to the Frank Frazetta Museum.
Oh, nice.
It's right near the Delaware Water Gap, which is in between New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And I've been wanting to go for the longest time, and I bought a bunch of his books, and they're amazing. I would have pulled those up, but I don't want to accidentally show anyone something, nudity or something.
Oh, no worries.
Well, anyway, I have several Frazetta books that I was in love with, but here's Vagabond that I was telling you about.
Okay.
This guy's art is bananas. I'm trying to find some good panels here. Come on. And there's a million good panels. Come on. So here's some of his faces, for example. But the action is... Can I show violence? Do you think that's all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
The guy gets his arm chopped off, samurais, blood, and
nice.
Crazy. But anyway, this story arc is amazing. If anyone wants to be exposed to just this series, where is it? If you can see that. It's so intricate and exquisite. His name is Takahiko Inoue. So this series is amazing. And then there's this other series I was in love with called Blom by
I've never heard of that.
It's like a steampunk. He does architecture like I've never seen before. See, I'm not doing a good job of showing this stuff off. The way he draws action, it's so energetic. Somebody he'll draw a panel of a guy shooting a crazy huge gun, and then the whole next page will be like the clouds opening up from the shockwave. And he takes the time to let himself do that. I'm trying to find good examples. If you just see the energy flying across the panels.
Jeez.
And he does these architecture. He's very much like Akira's artist, Tsutomu Nibe, who I have here. And everybody's seen Akira, but just show it off for fun. I mean, everybody knows what Akira looks like. Come on. Just the fact that
if they don't, I don't know what they're doing here, but they better go fix that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, just who would take the time to draw such intricate? I just, the pen stroke is so... Everyone knows what it feels like to make a pen stroke, and to see what people can do, these crazy Japanese people, what they can do with a simple pen that anyone can buy, and then some gray tones that they slap on top. It's like we're like I was saying, we are living in the shadows of titans who invented all these techniques, and I'm just copying them. And the one thing I can bring to the table that they haven't is my George's experiences. So that's why it's important to me to go and experience riding a horse or being out in the desert for a little while. And of course, I find this really ironic because I'm telling you all these things, and you've had a million times more experiences of these sorts of things and life experiences that I think is incredible to draw from. But that's what I think art is an artist can communicate, these are the kinds of things I experienced, and I'm going to draw you a drawing of what it felt like to be in the desert or shoot a gun or feel an explosion or something. That's so cool to be able to draw from your personal experiences if it's possible. But anyway, that's sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I think that's like a perfect like capping note right there. I think that, you know, we've been going for about an hour and 20 minutes now. This was a awesome conversation. I think that was a fantastic note to wrap things up on. George, do you have any final things you want to add? Any questions for me? Anything you want to plug? Anything at all?
Well, I will thank you for the invitation to talk. It's always amazing to talk to other artists, especially artists who I look up to. And I want everyone to know that I think your art is, I look at your stuff and my jaw drops every time. So thanks. I want to say it's an honor. And it's so fun to talk to someone who is so skilled. And I hope we can meet up in person and draw together someday. Or if I could look through your sketchbook, that would be like a religious experience for me.
Yeah, I would love to meet up sometime.
Let's do it.
If I don't know what your itinerary will be like with this Arizona trip, but if you do find yourself around San Diego County at some point, just hit me up.
I can go out of my way. I would be proud to. Yeah, we could talk after this, and I'll let you know.
All right, sounds good. All
right. For projects to, you guys can back Ghost of the Badlands. I also have a children's book. I don't know if that's relevant.
Yeah, go ahead, plug it. Yeah, your website as well, if that's relevant.
Yeah. We've got this little book here called Gooseberry Pie. Nice. We're selling it on my wife's shop, actually, which is Polkadot, POKIDOT at Etsy or .etsy.com. But yeah, we made a children's book about like a little cute mouse, and it's really sweet. But you know, if people like, let's find a panel that I like real quick.
All right.
There's art like this that kids might like.
Oh, nice.
It's not like a cheapo, you know, children's book where I'm just taking your money. It's like a 50-page book with lots of words, and it's designed to be read to children. So if anyone's our age and they have kids, nice. I think it's a good, wholesome, non-woke, you know, there's no ideology or anything in it. Nice. So there's 2 books that you can grab if you want to support my family.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be sure to include those in the show notes there. So anyways, George, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody who watched, make sure you get Ghost of the Badlands. Get it now. You won't regret it, but you will regret not getting it. I can promise you that. So, all right.
Watch out.
Thanks, George. I'll see you. I'll catch up with you afterwards.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.